Mascot horror, the genre that just keeps pumping out more and more games. Feels like every day a new one of these pops up, and that was especially true in 2024. 2024 was a gigantic year for the genre. We got a ton of new Mascot horror products, including Poppy Playtime Chapter 3, which was really huge. We had Indigo Park, which hasn't really had anything since. We had Garten Band Band 7. We had FNAF Into the Pit. We had Amanda the Adventurer 2. And most of all, we had a little game that we will be talking about today called Finding Frankie. Now, out of the whole list that I just said, this is probably one that a lot of you don't really recognize. And yeah, it's not really up there with the big names like FNAF or Poppy Playtime, but if I'm being honest, it should be celebrated way more than those games. Poppy Playtime Chapter 3 is pretty good in its own right, and FNAF Into the Pit was actually a really surprising big hit for the genre, which, I mean, FNAF usually is. But Finding Frankie, at least for me, really came onto the scene and just stole the show. And to this day, it is one of the most unique Mascot horror games I have ever had the pleasure of playing. So today, we're going to be talking about it. Without further ado, let's go! Okay, so story-wise, this game moves at, like, a lightning fast pace. I think on this, like, playthrough that I did for this recording, I beat the game in probably an hour and 20 minutes or so, and it took me around 2 hours on my first playthrough. This game is very, very short if you know what you're doing. But honestly, I don't really see that as much of an issue. Basically, the game starts off by showing you a pretty cool cutscene of the manufacturing of a bunch of cereal boxes that then leads into our player character, who's this unnamed, like, game contestant, receiving a tape that lets them join this kind of almost Squid Game style game that is to the death without us really knowing. Then we actually spawn in and are immediately put into this box where they basically teach us the rules of the game and say all these people are watching, and then we meet up with the other contestants in the next room and go on our way. Or so we think, because this is what really happens. Of course, because we're the main character, we escape with our lives and make it past Frankie before we go to a little parkour training, like, tutorial section. And if I'm being honest, this is where, like, some of the best aspects of the game come in, because these unique parkour mechanics are genuinely probably my favorite part of the entire game, and it's what makes it so darn unique. Basically, this isn't like any other Mascot horror game where it's just shift to run. And here, it's shift to run, control to slide, and then you can, like, latch onto stuff and swing, and then you can also double jump using certain things. It is crazy. And then you can use, like, a pipe to slide around. It gets kind of insane. These parkour sections in this game, which is the main selling point of the game besides the horror, are genuinely a lot of fun. And I mean, just sliding around the whole facility makes traversal so much more fun than most other games. After this, you're taken into the main lobby where you're told to find Henry Hotline, who is a character we'll see a lot more of in just a minute. And then this is also where we're introduced to the main puzzle system of the game, which are these circuits, where you basically just have to hit all these different buttons in a certain amount of time in order to unlock a new area. And then we do another one of these circuit puzzles, using a bit more parkour this time, and we are on our way for real this time. After completing yet another parkour section, we make it to the second floor, where we don't exactly find Henry Hotline. We may or may not find some hanging bodies, which is a little... It's a little bit unexpected. I don't know about you guys. I wasn't really expecting that. Once again, we do another one of these circuit puzzles. Another one which is pretty cool. This one, for the most part, really isn't that difficult. And then once we complete it, we get to access a vent. And in this vent, we find what looks like that one character from Toy Story. From Toy Story 3, like the phone guy. And this is Henry Hotline. He's basically a big version of the phone thingy from Toy Story 3, which is kind of funny. We eventually chase him down into this room, where he gets away from us for now. Then, after a little bit more parkouring, we make it into this vent, where something pretty creepy happens, not gonna lie. that little line there from the walkie-talkie makes this whole thing sound like it's all scripted, which is an idea that we'll get back to very soon, I'm sure. After this, though, we get an amazing chase with Frankie, where we go to start this circuit, and then he appears right at us, right out of the wall, and it's pretty crazy, I'm not gonna lie. This whole chase is really just super well done. It uses the parkour capabilities of the game to its fullest extent. It makes for a really fast-paced and fun chase, full of a lot of really high-intensity scenes. Because it's so easy to get away from Frankie because you can go so fast, it makes it way more fun because then you really get up close and personal with him at a couple points, and it is pretty nuts, not gonna lie. From there, though, it takes you through, like, a couple Fall Guys style mini games before you eventually make it into the fun tube, so ending the chase. You then do another one of the breaker puzzles before moving on to another little funny parkour section, this time to the theme of another one of the game's characters, Deputy Duck. Now, this whole parkour section really isn't all that difficult. It is pretty fun, though, and I'm pretty sure if you fall, Frankie does come and get you. I'd argue it definitely adds a lot more tension than what could be present. I really appreciate that there's, like, some kind of consequence for failing this parkour, you know? And then you see Frankie climbing up the wall, which is low-key pretty unsettling. And then you come face to face with Deputy Duck himself, and honestly, he is not very threatening at all. He quite literally falls over and then tries to, like, peck your face. That's, like, the most that he does. But we teach him a lesson really quickly, and now he's our little companion that we're going to take around for the rest of our journey. So he has two unique little abilities, and he acts as a flashlight, as well as, like, a little scan tool that kind of lets us know where to go throughout these vast vents that we have to go through. But eventually, we jump down one of these vents, and it leads us to a pretty creepy little room where we finally, after all these minutes, come face to face with our dear friend from Toy Story 3, Henry Hotline. So throughout the map, you'll find a bunch of these different little phones, and they don't really do anything. You can kind of just interact with them and make them ring, but the lore states that Henry Hotline feels every time you ring one of these phones because they were probably put in place just to, like, piss him off. And so the player keeps ringing these, and it's making him pretty upset, not gonna lie. So, in typical Mascot horror fashion, he starts to chase us because he's pretty mad. And I'm not gonna lie, this is probably the absolute scariest part of the game, because you have to ring a bunch of these phones without him catching you. And this is very intense because this room that you're in is incredibly dark. It makes for a genuinely pretty effective horror section that I died on multiple times on my second playthrough. The way I see it with this game, for the most part, it doesn't require a ton of skill or planning or anything. You can kind of just get away from everything, mainly because of your crazy parkour abilities. But here, this section actually requires a good amount of planning and strategy, and I really do appreciate that. It makes it a lot more fun, in my opinion. Now, once you ring all these phones, you make it to an exit where you get a little bit cornered by Henry Hotline. And then he chases you through a little vent right here, and it is pretty darn intense. It's honestly another really great chase scene that is a lot of fun to actually get through. Plus, I think Frankie's there at some point, just adding to the absolute chaos of everything. And I mean, when I say chaos, it is a chaotic chase scene. But once again, this game is just too much fun to be really that scary. And of course, after doing a circuit breaker puzzle, we make it out alive. But then, off in the distance, we can hear Henry Hotline being attacked by Frankie because he failed. Which, once again, adds to a lot of the kind of scary bits of this game, where I would argue, personally, it's not that scary of a game, but if you really dive deep into the lore, it gets pretty dark. After this, we go to Frankie's Crash Course, and this is kind of like another Fall Guys style minigame, where you have to dodge, like, the oncoming obstacles that are on this, like, conveyor belt system. And yeah, it's pretty fun. It's pretty neat. It ramps up in speed really quickly, but overall, it's really not too challenging. Then after this, we kind of break off into, like, what I'd consider probably the back half of the game. Our first task is to reset the breakers in this giant garbage heap before we eventually come across this pretty interesting character.
What a surprise! Don't worry your mask-covered head. I'm the real Frankie, and totally not a lazily written plot device to add a twist to the story to keep our viewers entertained so we can avoid going bankrupt.
Authorities have discovered 3 dead bodies on the premises of Frankie's Parkour Palace, who seem to be 3 of the 4 unfortunate contestants chosen to participate in the company's last game show before bankruptcy. One contestant seems to still be on the premises and potentially alone.
Well, now that pleasantries have been exchanged, you have a journey to continue. I'll set you on your path. Go towards the last remaining elevators and I'll guide you from there.
So yeah, that's a pretty interesting little scene right there with the other Frankie, and we'll get more into that with the lore later. But now we head down to the water mains of this whole facility, and I'm not gonna lie, this part is a little creepy. Personally, water in horror games kind of freaks me out. I don't know what it is. It, like, just in general, like, even in the early LEGO games and stuff, water levels always freak me out. So this especially is right up my alley for scares. We start off by doing a little breaker puzzle, which then leads to the other Frankie saving us from Frankie. And I'm not gonna lie, this scene freaked me out on my first playthrough. Oh my goodness. And then after this, we're trying to get away from Frankie's giant hand while we flip a bunch of these breakers once again. This is really like the only puzzle type in the game for the most part. But I'd argue that it really doesn't get very stale at all, just because they put it in enough unique situations where it still stays pretty fresh for the most part, which is really nice. That's definitely a big plus considering the Mascot horror, like, curse of having really bad stale puzzles. And then once we finally get out of this area, we come once again face to face with Henry Hotline.
You're our lucky contestant. No one has ever made it this far. Usually only mere seconds. If you're lucky, a minute or 2. They play easy, and they pity you. The only reason the ones above decided to keep you around is because you're boosting the ratings. Our viewers are entertained. We aren't going bankrupt, and this isn't our last game show. As soon as you're eliminated, 4 new cereal boxes will be sent out all around the world, sitting and waiting for its lucky contestant, just like you. I have something to give you as a token of my appreciation for bringing us into the light again. If not for you, higher-ups probably would have instructed Frankie to kill me. I'm not sure if he still works or not. Hello?
So obviously that ending is pretty shocking right there, but I'd argue that the rest of the conversation is just as important. It is a really telling conversation all about the game, and it makes this world just feel so much more full, and I think that's really cool. It makes me want to just keep playing the game. And plus he gives us our little Deputy Duck back, which is really nice. Except he looks a little messed up now, but we're just gonna ignore that. Now, in this next section, we basically have the opportunity to go one of 2 ways. Eventually, you have to do both, but the one that I did first is the Noob section, which is this really cute minigame where you have to, like, explode these little guys called Noobs within a certain amount of time. And honestly, I freaking love these guys. They are so cute, and they just run away from you. And, like, I know there's plenty of people who probably were frustrated by this section because it's, once again, not very easy because the parkour mechanics of the game can be a little frustrating at times, especially in, like, kind of more close quarters, like, situations like this. But I don't know, man. Both times I played this, I had an absolute blast with it. It was so fun. Once again, though, this is definitely something straight out of Fall Guys, which I think when this game came out, it actually said that it took inspiration from, like, certain Fall Guys minigames and stuff, which is pretty neat. Like, a Fall Guys horror game is a neat concept. Eventually, you catch enough noobs and jump through enough rings for this giant cereal box to drop down and give you one of the keys that you need. The other area is definitely a little bit trickier because this is probably the hardest circuit puzzle in the entire game. It takes you out this entire, like, water park facility that has, like, 1 or 2 different circuit breaker puzzles that really aren't that notable because there's really not that much to them, but they can be a little bit confusing at times. Once you do this first circuit breaker puzzle, it brings you to this section with a bunch of fans, and once you complete that, you get the next cereal box and the next key. So now you can enter Frankie's Frozen Peak and head down to the end of the game with one final obstacle, it tells you. From inside the elevator, you can hear the game show guy saying, "One final lucky contestant," and other stuff like that. Now, on my playthrough, because I had already played this game and kind of knew some of the secret things to do, I went up to this office area that you can weirdly access, and it's a pretty creepy scene in there. Basically, there's some files displayed on the table, but the other Frankie is in there and just literally just watches you. Like, very, very creepily just watches you. And I don't know, man. This kind of freaked me out. There's one final parkour section, which is a really fun one. It's kind of like Slime Climb from Fall Guys, and it's a really good section. This is probably one of my favorite parkour bits in the whole game. And once you get to the top of it, you get put into another parkour section, just to keep this last one kind of going. And once again, this is low-key a pretty difficult one. This time there's like saw blades and stuff that you have to get around. And, I mean, I'd argue it really isn't that difficult, but for someone who hasn't played something like Fall Guys, I can see this new of a concept being put in like this very deadly scenario can be pretty tricky. And then you reach the end, which is basically the hexagon minigame from Fall Guys. This time here it's called Hexa Havoc, and this is a really cool final battle with Frankie. And every time I've had to do this, it's taken me a couple tries to get this right. It's definitely not a very easy final battle, but it is a lot of fun, and the music here goes pretty insane, I'm not gonna lie. Especially in a genre that isn't exactly known for having great boss fights or anything, this is a big breath of fresh air, and I really, really like this one. But as the timer ticks to 0, you have the opportunity to flip a lever, and that lever means the end of the game. You basically come to a standoff with Frankie, where all of these noobs are released by pulling that lever, and what do the noobs do? They explode and crush Frankie. But you're on the final platform, and, of course, it falls, leaving you with quite a gruesome end to your journey. As the credits of Season 57 of Finding Frankie start to roll, a little twist happens. So after all, we won, and we get taken to what's pretty much the winner's room. And then we get to see this final cutscene, which I kind of just want to play the whole thing for you guys because it's kind of nuts.
As promised, $5 million in cash. You're the first contestant we've ever had who won. Hundreds of people last a few seconds. A few last a couple of minutes. But you're different. I like that. But let's be honest with ourselves for a second, contestant. We need each other. Especially you. I mean, look where you live. And you've helped us. Having a privately streamed and funded show isn't the easiest thing in the world. And then, on the verge of bankruptcy, you came along. Our star. But stars don't just leave after a season, do
what an ending to an incredible Mascot horror game. And plus, the ending credits song is just so much fun. I think it's absolutely adorable. And yeah, that was Finding Frankie. No pun intended, but a frankly amazing Mascot horror game that kind of flew under everyone's radars for the most part. Like, people played it and people didn't really go that crazy over it, but I would argue this is peak Mascot horror. I think Mascot horror is at its best when the genre is trying to do something different with itself, because so many of these games fall into the same formulaic tropes and traps and all that kind of stuff, and so it makes it so much more entertaining when they finally do something good with this genre. And Finding Frankie is exactly that. The parkour aspects of this game are definitely its best features. They're genuinely so much fun to experience and make for an experience that's really not like any other Mascot horror game. Because a lot of other Mascot horror games have parkour, and it sucks horribly. Looking at you, Hello Neighbor. Oh my god. But this is really the first Mascot horror game to do this right, and it is genuinely just amazing. Plus, the story is really interesting. I would be so down for them to make a sequel to this, where we do another season of Finding Frankie. I'd argue there's still a lot more story you can tell with this, and I mean, that ending leaves you on quite the cliffhanger. So yeah, if they ever make Finding Frankie 2, I will be here to play it. And yeah, so with that said, I think that's going to wrap it up for this video. If you guys did enjoy, make sure to leave a like and also subscribe to my channel and hit that notification bell so you know when I post more awesome videos like this. If you like this video, I would really highly recommend checking out the My Friendly Neighborhood video I did. That's pretty much this video, just with that game, where I kind of go over why it's one of the best Mascot horror games I've ever played. Trust me, it's a really fun one. I really liked making that one too. And yeah, in the comments, let me know if you've played Finding Frankie and if it's also up there for one of your favorite Mascot horror games. And if not, let me know. I'm very curious to see what you guys think about this one. And yeah, with that said, thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!